Mary, are you able to stream to Facebook?
Let me see. I guess so. I've never done that before. Live on Facebook.
Okay, so we are going to switch sides. I am going to claim, where is that thing?
Oh, you know what?
Oh.
I do not have my Facebook login.
Okay, so can you make me the host and then be a co-host? Then it will allow me to stream.
Did Jeremy come in? Did Jeremy come in?
He didn't send me the information, so let me see. Yeah, he's on here. I can admit him right now. Good.
Okay, you're the host.
I'm the host. All right, now let's see if I can. There it is. I can stream on Facebook. And then you are the co-host, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now let me turn on Facebook too. Hi, Jeremy. You're mute. Good. Now, Jeremy, I do not have a bio for you. So can you?
I really don't have one.
He's modest. He's
Listen, we have to say something nice about you, you know? Okay, so how about, since you don't have a bio, how about I don't read Carl's bio? I will introduce the two of you. And my first question will be for you to tell me about yourselves. How about that?
There you go. There you go. There you go. Hey, Jay, are you queued up to show the back end of Text Connect?
No, I don't, because I haven't been able to go in and create any dummy accounts. Yes, I didn't want to pull up anything for HIPAA.
Okay.
What we may be able to do, if time permits, just kind of go in and show how the users can navigate through it, though.
The Text Connect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeremy Jones.
Yeah, because I want to touch on some of the innovations that we've made. That and one of them is, well, the biggest one is Text Connect, right? And the back end, I wanted to show that with this single point of access and the things that we have the capability of doing, right? So, but if you don't have the dummy account with your name on it, then don't worry about it, because we don't want to violate HIPAA.
Okay, now both of you are from Building Promise USA, right?
Last time we checked, he's right down the hall.
Okay, so now that we've made the slight change, so this is what today's conversation is about: re-entry into society. Here to chat with us, Carl F. Hunter II, M.Div. Now, Carl, do you want me to call you Reverend? What do you want me to call you?
Well, no. My seminary professor told me a long time ago that my name was Carl Hunter, right? And Reverend is the name that the community gives you, right?
Okay.
Because you're revered. So as I am today, I'm Carl, right?
Okay, Carl.
But this, on the low, this happens to be my kingdom ministry. But I don't talk about that much. So.
All right. So I'll just say Carl F. Hunter II, M.Div.
You don't have to say anything.
I know.
You can say Carl F. Hunter II.
Okay. And Jeremy Jones.
The first.
The first. The first of his name. Really, the first?
No, he's not. I'm just playing.
Okay. All right. Both from Building Promise USA, a peer-led, peer-run, and peer-driven nonprofit organization in Austin that focuses on, do you want all of that said, or?
That's up to whatever works for you.
Okay.
What it does say that we do focus, we are the coordinating agency for, in 2021, we became the coordinating agency for entry services for the city of Austin.
Okay, so do you prefer that the coordinating one versus?
I think you can once you give the introduction call, you could give that.
I can talk about all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're a peer-led, peer-run, peer-driven nonprofit whose target population is formerly incarcerated men and women coming to the community.
All right, in Austin that focuses on all of those were just run out. Focuses on formerly incarcerated individuals. There ought to be a
providing supportive services.
Okay. So in Austin, that provides supportive services. To
formerly incarcerated men and women. Yeah.
All right, to formerly incarcerated men and women. Yep. And then somebody will say, well, we are all not men and women. So,
well, individuals.
Should I say individuals?
Yeah. We say individuals.
Yes. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me make you a co-host. Perhaps that is why.
Yes.
And there you go. All right, at this point, we can admit folks. And then admit all, yes. And I'm getting this. We're going to share to a group. Central Texas. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon. We've got 3 minutes before everyone gets on board. So I would like to tell you about the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. Show by hands or virtual hands, how many of you have heard about this conference? Only 1, 2. Oh, really?
Hey, beautiful.
Hi.
How you doing, Lady Jane?
Doing well, Mama. How are you?
Oh, it's hot in Texas, in Dallas, and everywhere else.
Everyone. This is a very informal gathering, so don't be.
Well, I'm traveling on a bus coming from prayer, so I'm going to mute myself and I might put the camera out, but I am here and I'm listening because it's going to be good information.
Thank you. We've got some new cousins, Nell. We've got some new cousins.
Hey, cousins. Thank you.
So, if you have ever attended the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference, or you haven't, and this is your first time, please consider yourself a member of our family, and so you are a cousin. That's all that is. But this conference meets in February of every year. It is a conference that focuses on mental health, substance use, intellectual and developmental disabilities in the African American community. But the conference itself welcomes everybody because we do know that the community is not made up of only African Americans. So there is a part for every one of us to play. We do share resources. We have service providers exhibit at the conference to share the resources that is already in the community. We encourage networking, collaboration, and just building a community of like-minded folks. And we also have a lot of fun. So I am inviting you all to check out our website, which is www.ctaafsc.com for more information. And you can also watch previous or past conferences and forums. All right. If you have a story to tell, if you have a lived experience with mental health, substance use, IDD, we have a place for you at the conference for you to share that story. So if you're interested, again, ctaafsc.com, apply to submit your proposal to speak at the conference. Everybody's welcome, everybody. Thank you. I do see some new cousins and familiar faces. Again, it is a very informal gathering, so no, nothing serious. Okay, I am going to click go live on Facebook. Today, I happen to be at the front as the moderator for this. All right, folks, my name is Lady Jane Aqua. I'm the Special Events Manager at Integral Care. I welcome you all to Together We Will Heal Forum. Awesome. Like I said, this conference, the vision of the conference is to educate African Americans on mental health, substance use disorder, and intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as the total well-being of the African American community. But the conference welcomes everybody, every race, creed, color, everybody is welcome. We hope that this forum will provide the opportunity for you all to participate in conversations that offer education, encouragement, and resources. We have a few housekeeping rules. One is to keep your microphones muted at all times. There will be time for you to ask a question or add a comment to this conversation. When that time comes, you may raise your hand and we will ask you to unmute. Now, sometimes we talk about things that are triggering or will make us emotional. When that happens, please turn off your video and take care of yourself. If you need to talk to someone, please call Integral Care's 24/7 hotline. And the number is 512-472-4357. Also know that you are streaming live on Facebook. So if you're on video, smile. All right, so today's conversation is about re-entry into society. Here to chat with us are two people that I've known for a while, Carl F. Hunter II and Jeremy Jones. First of his name, Jeremy, and they are from Building Promise USA. Building Promise USA is a peer-led, peer-run, peer-driven nonprofit organization in Austin that provides supportive services to formerly incarcerated individuals. Okay, well, let's dig into the questions. Let's have a conversation. I am going to pin, or perhaps spotlight, and then the three of us can have a conversation. All right. I will start with Carl. Carl, tell us what re-entry is. I'm sure all of us have heard about re-entry, but what exactly is re-entry?
Well, first, let me thank you guys for inviting us to be on this forum today. And there are a whole lot of people, right? And I'm glad I see some of my friends in the room, right? And some of my colleagues and some of my employees. So it makes it a real safe place. But since Lady J is here, I know it's a safe place. Let me tell you a little bit about Building Promise USA. Building Promise is a peer-led, peer-run, peer-driven organization. That means that 51% of our leadership is directly impacted by the criminal justice system. You know, I'm here because of my son who's serving 36 years in the Colorado Department of Correction. So he's my muse. And a lot of the things that we're doing is we're trying to impact the collateral consequences, those things that are a direct result of their charge, but more importantly, social stigma. You know, the social stigma is that thing, that mark of Cain that says that once a criminal, always a criminal in the eyes of the public. And what we're trying to do is mitigate some of those barriers that impact, you know, those folks who are returning home. My son, who's my muse, I quote him quite frequently. And the one quote that he had, he actually misquoted Benjamin Franklin. And he said, the change occurs when those who are least impacted become just as morally outraged as those who are, right? And so a lot of the work that we're doing is to impact public perception about this particular population, you know, that they paid their debt to society, now let them come back and live productive lives. And so reentry, I'll define as those who are returning home from prison and or jail back to the community. You know, there's some folks who have returned to the community but do not get any supportive services. And there's some who are coming back and understand that, you know, we're talking a lot about mental health. There's a trauma of going in, there's a trauma of being there, and there's a trauma of coming back in the community. and the trauma of going back in community if a person has been gone for an extended length of time. My son went into prison when it was iPhone 5. It's iPhone 14. How much has the world changed since then? And we have folks coming back into the community who have had extended periods of time in prison. I had one particular friend who had spent 10 years in prison, and this is one, and anecdotally, something that is very important for us to understand, right? We were roommates when I was in a recovery house, and he went to go find some strawberry oatmeal, and he went to the grocery store, and he came back shaken, and he said, "Carl, I just went for strawberry oatmeal, but there were so many choices in the cereal aisle, and I've had my choices taken away from me for the last 10 years." Right. And I didn't know how to respond to that because all I wanted was oatmeal. And then I have Cocoa Puffs, cornflakes. And so, you know, the impact of what happens when folks return to community and they don't have any supportive services. And so, you know, we are honored that the city of Austin, we won the reentry services grant, and we're honored by the fact that the city of Austin chose us to be the coordinating agency for reentry services for the city of Austin. And what we are presenting is a peer-based model. There are other models of reentry programs, but Building Promise is focusing on proving the viability of a peer-based model as one among many other models. And so we've become this, you know, we call ourselves it was the one-stop shop initiative that was the title of our grant submission. But what we've come to understand that we're the single point of access for people coming back in the community to an existing ecosystem that has already existed long before I came to Texas. But everybody acted in silos. And so we have folks coming back in the community having to go to each silo in the city of Austin in their desire to make reentry a better experience for those who are coming back, decided to have a single point of access. And Building Promise is that for the city of Austin at this point. I hope I answered your question because I talk a lot.
You have. And Jeremy will probably have something to add. Yes, Jeremy? Tell us who you are first.
Yes, thank y'all for having us. Like Carl said, my name is Jeremy Jones. I'm the peer support supervisor here at Building Promise USA. Having lived experience and being formerly incarcerated, I can tell you that reentry to me is a handout, it's a hand up, it's hope, and it's help. Just like Carl gave the example of his roommate, you know, going out looking for the oatmeal, and just having the different choices. So many clients that we deal with, you know, if you look at studies, it shows that over 600,000 people are released from prison each year, with 2/3 of them being rearrested within 3 years of their release, and sometimes within a few months of their release, because oftentimes it's just they feel hopeless. There's no support. We have individuals that we deal with that are coming home that have no support in areas of simply filling out an application for food stamps or insurance. They don't have access to an ID or a birth certificate so that they can get a job. We've had instances to where, as Carl, you know, touched on the issue with trauma, the trauma from coming home, PTSD. We work with individuals who are homeless, and we've help find them transitional housing, and they rather be out on the streets in 103-degree weather because of incidents or occurrences that has happened in the prison system, that they don't want to share a room or they don't want to be in a confined space with other individuals. And so to me, reentry is support and is help.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Carl, for what you do. Thank you very much. My follow-up question for this is re-entry the same for everyone? Is it a one-size-fits-all thing for everybody?
Let me do one caveat. Jeremy doesn't. Jeremy is the heart of building Promise USA, right? We're a peer-driven organization, but what Jeremy's the peer support supervisor, but it's his heart that makes a difference. And he doesn't want to talk about it, but if it wasn't for Jeremy, a whole lot of people wouldn't get the level of help and assistance that they do. In response to your question, no, it's not a one size fit all, because everybody comes back to community needing different things. Since we've been doing it, some folks have come back in the community, and some people who are existing in the community from incarceration. All they needed was a laptop computer, right? And we were able to take care of that need. But some have come looking for help with their laundry, and the next thing we know, that we're working with them to get their ID, we're working with them to get their a place to stay. One particular gentleman, and Jeremy touched on it, would rather stay outside than be in a confined place with folks. But one particular gentleman came and we helped him get his laundry, and the next thing we know, we're getting into a place, into a residence. And he talked about that he hadn't had sheets in more than a year, right? So when we have we take a lot of photos, and you see him looking at his sheets, and he talked about being in a safe place because he was living outside and he hadn't been in a safe place in quite some time. So one size doesn't fit all. Not only do we see that reentry not only affects those who are returning home from incarceration, but it also impacts the family, right? Like, say for myself, my son, some days I blame myself for my son being in prison, right? And so there's an impact not only on the person returning home, but it's an impact on the family. And so we service, we assist both sides of the circle, I would say.
Right. Jeremy, have anything to add?
No, ma'am. I think Carl spoke to it. It's definitely not a one size fits all.
Right, because everybody needs something different.
Yes.
Okay, but what are some of the misconceptions that we have about individuals going through reentry?
The biggest one is the social stigma that is attached to someone returning home. That impacts a lot of the viability of how they come back home. Understand that the underworld economy is always hiring, right? And when we look at the fact that a person in prison is worth $70,000 a year to the system, they're welcoming them back, right? But the biggest problem is social stigma. Some of the collateral consequences, let's say somebody who has a drug charge, some of them can't get social services because of the drug charge. Now, you can murder somebody, right, and get certain levels of assistance, but if you have a drug charge, you can't. So what does that mean to someone who's been in prison or jail for quite some time, and they have health issues? And some folks return to the community with chronic health issues. We have been, we build what we call bridge partnerships with organizations, and one of our bridge partnerships is the Black Male Health Clinic. It's right across the hall. So we made it a part of our intake process to, as soon as someone comes through our doors, we ask them the health question, and they're like, I can't get health insurance. But that's not true. We send them across the hall, and they not only get health insurance, they get other services attached to that. We're also working with an organization called Community Coalition for Health in one of our more recent initiatives, which is called HIRE, the Hiring Initiative for Reentry Empowerment. We were able to sign up out of the 63 people who out of the 200 people who registered for the event, we signed up 59 of them. Well, the number is still mounting. 59 of those people walked away just from the registration aspect with health insurance, MAP or MAP Plus. So there are organizations working in the community that can help us mitigate some of those things. So I don't know if I answered your question, but hope I did.
Yes, you did. Jeremy, any misconceptions that you've gathered working with folks?
It is, there are a lot of invisible barriers that our clients deal with. And, and I anytime I get a chance to share my story, I always like to hone in on the fact that I was one of those people that were prejudiced against those that were coming back into society until I got caught. I would always think that, because everywhere we look around, you see help wanted signs, or you see some places saying that they're hiring. But the barriers, it wasn't until that I was incarcerated, and I served a couple of weeks before I was out on bond, and I ended up being on probation. But being on probation for 2 years barred me from I was at one time a liaison for the state here in Austin. I couldn't even wash dishes. I couldn't get a job washing dishes. I couldn't get a job pushing carts. And so all these invisible barriers that our clients face makes it hard for them. And so you get a lot of people that stigmatize this population and say they don't want to change. They don't want the help. Just last week, I was trying to help an individual find a studio apartment, and she's making $12 an hour working on a construction site. And the lowest apartment that I can find that would accept her was $1,300 a month for a 600 square foot apartment. And so if you think about someone that has a family, or someone that can't even get a job making $12 an hour, like, how do they survive? How do they make it? And so I think a lot of times the stigmatism that's placed on the reentry community is really harsh because they face so many barriers.
Let's talk about the fact about folks coming back to community. The two things we found out that people need most are they want a job and they want a place to stay, right? And the place to stay is very, very hard, especially in Austin. One, it's hard. Some days I can't afford to live in Austin. But we look at a population who at many times they'll have the $200 for the application fee, but those who are taking the application already know once they find out the person has a felony, that they're not coming into their apartment. And those are places that they've been able to find have not been in the best kind of neighborhoods. And now that you have the transition that's going on in Austin, that they're building condominiums in every community, right? So now the housing is even more limited for this particular population, right? And so that's a major barrier for folks. But everybody's not coming back to Austin either, right? Once they leave confinement.
Okay, so I hear there is a need for support in the community, but how can we support our loved ones to make their re-entry journey successful or even easy? How can we as a community, as a family, as business owners, how can we support folks in re-entry?
The biggest one is, again, public perception, right? I'm going to take a risk. There are a lot of people in this room who have at least a cousin, right, or a nephew, or somebody who's been in prison or been incarcerated, and so there's a sensitivity these days, right, that we should have with this particular population. We can help them by helping them have a since then story. I made a mistake in life. Right. But that mistake shouldn't follow me the rest of my life. Right. All of us, have credit card bills. Once we pay our credit card off, it goes back to zero. That should be the same thing for these folks returning into the community. They paid their debt to society. Don't let that debt follow them the rest of their lives. A person who has been incarcerated over their lifetime makes 40% less than someone who never has, right? So the expectation of us, how can someone raise a family, understanding that the cost of living continues to rise, but they make 40% less than most of the population, right? So how we can help those of us who are business owners, those of us who have access. How can we give this particular population access? And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, you know. And as family members, usually family members, and we get a lot of calls. Pre-release, we get a lot of calls from family members on what can they do to assist their family members. And since then, Building Promise has made some innovations. What I came to understand is that can't live in Austin, and everybody's not coming back to Austin. So what we've done in collaboration with Connect ATX is create Text Connect on our website. Text Connect is our platform where anybody getting out of jail in the state of Texas can put in a zip code and find resources in their communities. And that's how we help a lot of the family members. And it even works in New Jersey, because I put my my zip code in 07753, and there were over 2,600 resources in Neptune, New Jersey for somebody returning home. And so that goes across the board. We can go anywhere in the United States. If you come to our website, you can find resources for those who are returning home. And so that's the part that helps the family members. Also, the clinical aspect. You can also find clinicians because the family is directly impacted, you know, especially if they've created a well system, right, that was dysfunctional when the person left, because they allowed that person to exist in that system. You know, if you have a system and one broken cog is allowed to exist in the system, the whole system is dysfunctional. So now the family members had this person removed for a little while and become functional. Now they have to deal with that person, potentially having to deal with that person coming home. And what does that mean to the system again, right? So yes, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to assist somebody coming back into the community.
Absolutely right. Now, folks, this is an open conversation. So if you have a comment, a question, you may raise your hand or type your question or comment in the chat. Robert, I see your hand up. Do you want to unmute and say something?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. And I know I'm stepping in just a bit after we've begun, but my name is Robert Lilly. I was released from incarceration approximately 90 days ago. I'm currently employed with Grassroots Leadership as a criminal justice organizer and participatory defense organizer. This is not the first time I've worked in this space. I want to also emphasize that this is my third time effectively as an adult reentering society after an incarceration. I don't say that with any pride nor any shame. I just say it as by way of qualification for some insights that I might share from this point forward. You asked a very important question about how family and community can be of support. One of the things that I said to myself this last time I was incarcerated was that for me, reentry had to begin the day I walked inside the prison institution. And so for me, a critical part of our success upon our return is the work that we do while we're incarcerated. And that requires a great deal of support from the outside in, because, you know, accessing quality materials, resources like books, correspondence, having family contacts, these are all very essential to one's sense of hope and self-efficacy when the door opens up, and believing that there is on the other side support, and that they have the agency to pursue the hopes and dreams that they might design for themselves. And even on that note there, you know, sometimes folk like myself who found ourselves floundering for many years back and forth in prison, we don't even really have a sense of what it means to be a part of society. I started going to prison when I was a juvenile. And so for many years, I didn't know what it meant to even be a citizen or to belong to a community. So these are ideas that other folk in our community who hold these notions of what is true and good, they can be soundboards for us while we're incarcerated, so that we can begin to work out those ideas, preparing ourselves to be a part of this larger experiment called society. So to me, the process begins before the individual returns home. And oftentimes, by the time that individual returns home, if no work has been done on the other side, it's going to be a very sloppy process. And on that note, I would say that we have to have a certain degree of long suffering to be prepared to work with folk when they come home, because you're talking about a person that's essentially the equivalent of a child riding a bike. They're going to fall, and they're probably going to fall a great many times. For me, I'll say this in yield. I would look in the mirror many years ago. I would look in the mirror and I would see a grown man staring back at me, and I thought that I could do what other grown people could do in society. Unfortunately, what I didn't understand was that because I had been incarcerated dating back to my youth, I had been misshapen by the prison system, and also I hadn't yet been formed in emotional and psychological ways that I needed to be intentional about, taking steps to fill in the blanks of. And that took time, and it also took, more pain for me to get to the point where I could be humble enough to listen to somebody in ways that I could not, because I had that pride that made it challenging. And then when that time came, there were men around me, particularly men, but there were also women that I could look to as mentors. And that's a big issue that I would say would be necessary to help folk re-enter society and succeed. I'll yield there.
Thank you, Robert, for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I appreciate that very much. Now, I want to add a quick question before we forget. You talk about mentors. So my question to you all is, what role do peer support specialists play in reentry? Jeremy, you want to start?
That, Mr. Lilly, you pretty much described it. Oftentimes everyone that comes through our doors are different. Some are more resilient. Some are more ready to move forward than others. I wouldn't say more ready. Some are more equipped. And then we have others that we need to pull what's inside of them out of them, so that they can see the greatness that's within them. I give an example. I got a chance to hang out with one of our clients a couple of months ago, and we went just to hang out. I took him to hang out with some friends of mine, and he told me, like, this is the first time I've ever seen people get together, eat and hang out without being drunk or high. And to some people, that's foreign to them. But to me, that's what we do, right? But for someone else who my whole life, like Mr. Lilly was saying, like if you've been incarcerated or in and out the system since you're a youth, a lot of things that we deem as normal or what's normal to us, that isn't the story for everyone else. And so when we deal with, like you said, with the population or the community that we deal with, like I come in knowing that I have to be patient, that, everyone isn't the same. Like he said, some are going to fall, some are going to have bad days. And so the peer support aspect is really just being there to guide them back on the right track when they fall off or when they're veering off course.
And understand that everybody doesn't use a peer-based model. Right. So there are other kinds of reentry programs that don't necessarily use a peer-based model. So what we're doing is trying to prove concept. Back when Reggie Smith founded the organization, it was based on the adage that those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So we're utilizing this evidence-based model, which is peer support, to facilitate the reentry process. We're not necessarily trying to carry anyone. What we're trying to do is to walk with them through their process and to make the process a lot easier. We're not only just giving them a phone number to call to get their help, is that we form bridge partnerships. And so when they're going to ACC, they're necessarily not going to ACC to stand in line. They're going to ACC to see Mrs. Johnson, who we called before they got there. So when they're there, that those barriers are mitigated. And I want to say, hey, Robert, a whole lot of the stuff that I've learned from Robert. So I stand on his shoulders, right? And stand on his knowledge, because he gave me a lot before in my thinking on how to think about doing what we're doing.
Thank you, Carl. Miss Snell, your hand is up.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Nell Watts with the Phoenix Access Foundation in Dallas, Texas. And I'm just grateful that you guys are giving us this information. The Phoenix Access Foundation, what we do is we go directly into the prison and we target women who are about to be released. We target women who are getting ready to be released, who are living with HIV and also survivors of domestic violence. But what we are finding out, because we are strictly referrals, when they come out, they do a quick intake. Sometimes it's just, setting up services with providers or, getting them the application, like you say, for food stamps or just knowing where the transitional housing places are. But we want to go into a program now of a second level, like I was listening to your peer-based model, where we actually do not go to every single thing with them, but we want to go ahead and transition to a program like that. Can you suggest how we can learn how to set up peer-based models or peer support programs for the women and the clients that we deal with? You have any suggestions of how we can start, who we can learn from?
Sure. I put my email address in the chat. Please call me and we can talk about that. And we can come in and help you facilitate that model if need be.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you, Miss Neil. Now, folks, there are a lot of resources in the chat, so don't miss them. Laurie, your hand is up. Good to see you, Laurie.
Okay, so I got a few things. Hey, Carl.
Hey, Laurie.
You didn't tell me you were going to be on the screen.
when we were at the airport last week? Yeah. That's funny.
Okay, so you know that incarceration piece, it's like Mr. Robert was saying, like you got to start that re-entry part on the way out. I mean, when you're in prison, because that's pretty indicative of what a person is going to do once they get out, right? If they just sitting around playing dominoes, trying to figure out how to beat the system, ain't engaged in any kind of, help like a GED or whatever while they're incarcerated, as soon as people tell me that, what you gonna do when you get out? I'm gonna chill. I already know you going back to prison because chilling ain't gonna get you, anything. You gotta have a plan. My daughter's father, I have, family history of folks going in and out of prison. And even with the best family support services, if people are not willing or ready to do something different, nothing changes if nothing changes, right? With women, most systems are set up, re-entry, penitentiaries, jails, and it's geared toward men. And so they try to apply the same services to women that they do with men. So we probably got a history of more abuse, more sexual stuff, especially if drugs and alcohol was involved in getting in prison in the first place. The expectation that society have on women, more so than mothers, more so than fathers. And so, mom and dad can go to jail for the exact same thing, but the expectation that who's gonna get it the most is the mother. The expectation is for the mother to be in the house. We know that. We know that. And so you gotta be the worst mom in the world. And so trying to get those kids back, because people are ready. Get out of prison, get your kids. Get out of prison, get your kids. And so we jumped the gun without really having any transitional things set up, because we just think that we're ready to do something different because we're getting out of prison. And we are. Intentions are good. But if you don't have, the support, when you get out, because, sometimes people who can support you are basically in the same position that you're in. They may be undereducated and no education. They can't really help you fill out an application or anything like that. So I just think that I don't think it's any one answer. and dealing with people as individuals based on their needs, their limitations, their barriers, their abilities, is that has to be, assessed, and not just like, here you go do this, go do that. So it's we had this conversation about the reentry. So I'm interested in supporting the effort.
I think, Ms. Lori, just in response to what you said, I think that's why the peer support or the peer-based model is so important, because a lot of times or oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And so you get individuals that think like, I'm getting out, I'm coming home. The first thing you ask someone, one of the questions that we have on our intake form is like, do you have a reentry plan? And most people don't know what a reentry plan is. They think a reentry plan is, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a car, I'm going to get an apartment, get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and that's my plan. That doesn't change the way you think. I know people that have a woman or a man, a car, a job, and and a place to stay, and they still messed up. But when you can really speak with someone and say, like, what are your goals? A lot of us, I can remember, and I use myself as an example. I can remember 14 years ago being frustrated. I was on probation. I couldn't get a job. They were riding my back. But I'm a photographer. One of my biggest accomplishments is I'm a well-known photographer here in the area. I've been running my own business for 13 years now. But in that first year of me being on probation, I had a camera. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anything about a DBA. And I can remember my probation officer riding my back, saying, you need to get a job. You need to get a job. And I was telling them, hey, I'm applying for work. No one will hire me. And I can remember being frustrated and someone telling me, well, they told you to get a job, you have a business. And I said, well, how do I have a business? They said, well, you have a camera, you do photography. Why don't you go register your business? How do you do that? You don't know what you don't know, right? And they said, well, you take $16 and you go register for a DBA. And so I did that, and just that conversation started the business that I own today. And then it helped catapult me into some other things. And so I say that to say, like, I do believe that success starts when your mind changes, but a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And so, like, when we get clients that come in, it's not our job just to help you fill out a SNAP application or an application. Like, that's helpful, but I want to know, what are your goals? What are your dreams? What are some of your aspirations? What are some of the things that we can help you accomplish? We have a gentleman that we're working with. He's like, I wanted to drive trucks all my life. Well, you know that you can go get your CDL. That's something that you can do. And so I just want to, like you say, I just want to emphasize, re-emphasize, like, the peer support model is really grand, because it helps. We have 211, we have all these other services that just point people, go here, go there, go do this, go do that. But are we really grabbing them by the hand and sitting with them and saying, I'll help walk you through this process?
Uh-huh.
And what's unique about our intake process is what we have on the back end of Text Connect. And what we do is not only we can monitor our referrals, which come back and forth to us, but we also, when Jeremy sits with those who come to us, we develop a plan. We find out what their goals are, and that's how we facilitate some of the referrals and how we work with them.
I deal with people on probation, right? And that's the population of folks I've dealt with for the past 30 years. And just without even going to prison, the expectation of probation is a whole lot. Go to this class, go get a job, bring us your this, do that. So sometimes it could be a setup to reoffend and, eventually end up in prisons. but in addition to just being incarcerated, you know, my wife was incarcerated for like almost 3 years. But prior to that, you know, she had been smoking crack for several years as well. And so it wasn't just a re-entry from coming out of prison. It was also, you know, trying to come back to life after, you know, a career of drug use, specifically crack cocaine. So myself, I was on probation for 8 years, you know, and you're right, can't get a job, can't do nothing. You know, it's been a while back, and so they were really strict back then. But that you know, that addiction piece is just as big, because generally for, you know, people that I know in the community that I come from, they are prepared to have a party when you get home from where you've been, and we're gonna celebrate. And it's usually with the very thing that got you locked up in the first place, and that's drugs and alcohol. Somebody is ready to offer you something to get high, if they know that to be what you did before you went to prison. You know, so those things that you know, it's like, is treatment really treatment in prison? Mm-hmm. You know, especially if you still in general population. You know, so it's like, what is it? What's the fix? What's the fix in preparation for just getting out of prison?
If I may, I'd like to weigh in. I don't want to talk over anyone.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, I consider myself a person in long-term recovery. I'm now coming up on 4 years and 7 months and 15 days, and I'm very grateful for that. This has been a arduous journey for me. There was a time in my life where, you know, I didn't think I could live a life apart from using some kind of substance. I thought it was quite natural. It was necessary. It had a relevance in my life, but then I was a young person at the time, so I didn't have much to lose. As time went on, I began to notice that every time I was incarcerated in some way, it was connected to my substance use disorder. I began to entertain the possibility that maybe I needed to explore more about what was transpiring, you know, in my head and in my life. So suffice it to say, what I'm trying to point out is that it's been a gradual journey of self-exploration, trying to come to terms with a tool for coping that in my earlier years, I couldn't imagine life without. I had fallen in love with this particular way of living, and now everything around me was telling me that I could not continue down that road, or there would be consequences. It would take time for my mind and my heart to make peace with that. It wasn't easy. And, you know, it's like taking an iron comb and pulling it through a sheep's wool. But finally, you know, I got to a place, and it wasn't because I was so wise or smart. I think ultimately the challenges of the pain, the loss, the adversity, it became so much that I could not abide any longer staying where I was at. And so I remember, you know, there was some people coming into prison called the Winner Circle. It was the first time I'd ever seen, and I'm kind of speaking to the peer model here by this comment. It was the first time I had ever seen men and women that had looked like myself. They were African-American, they were formerly incarcerated, and they all purported to be in recovery. They came in, they were all lined up on the yard, and we listened to them speak, and it was absolutely amazing. I was on the edge of my seat listening to every story that they told. And I didn't even know anything about the peer model. It would be years before I came in contact with Dr. Deetra Hawkins, and she began to teach about this idea that I'd heard in prison from one of the counselors. She said, if it works for you, it works for you. You know, I had been trying to fit this square peg in the only hole that I thought was there, and that was the AA-NA model. And that did not suffice for me. It wasn't resonating with me. A lot of times the experiences were culturally insensitive. I was surrounded by white males and females who didn't seem to understand the trajectory of my life. And I didn't feel comfortable talking about my experiences in their presence. And so when I heard that there was this model that said that there were multiple ways to recovery, I had to learn more about it. And so I just kept, little by little moving in the direction, trying to figure out, where do you get that information? How do you become informed? I'll say this and yield. There was a time in my life when I had the desire, but my resources, or it was cost prohibitive. Then there were times when I was unhealthy, and so my circumstances didn't allow it. And then there were times I was employed, but my employers wouldn't allow me the sacrifice of a week-long commitment to the training. So this is a praise report today. I can tell you that I do have a peer recovery specialist that I'm working with. I connected with him while I was incarcerated. Secondly, I do meet with him twice a month. Parole actually does have a component in their protocol for those who graduate from the IPTC program, the in-prison therapeutic community, that they have to work with a peer specialist. And that's a little slippery slope, but I'll just point out that they are recognized in the model. And then lastly, I'm now registered with Recovery ATX to begin that training after almost 10 years of striving to be in position to do that. And again, it wasn't so much about the willingness. It was time the willingness was there and the health wasn't there. There was time the health was there and the finances weren't there. But I believe in this model because, when I talk with another person that's walked in my shoes, there's an unparalleled benefit to that no one else can provide. Nobody sitting on the other side of a desk could ever get to my heart the way somebody who's walked in my shoes can speak to me. And I think that's the model that definitely needs to be celebrated and endorsed in many more ways by various agencies that exist out there to help us.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you. Kenneth, I saw your hand up a moment ago.
Yeah, I almost hey, the question I have for both Carl and Jeremy. First of all, I celebrate the work that you both do. And so, hey, what obligations from this experience that we've learned do the institutions that incarcerate individuals have in this process of reentry, if they have any responsibility?
So I can tell you that my son is worth $70,000 a year to the prison industrial complex, right? And if you take that out by 10, when we have the 3 strikes you're out rule, if you have 3 brothers who are 30 years old, right? And they hit if you have 7 and you multiply that out, right? And they get life imprisonment for the rest of their life, and their life expectancy is 70. Well, it's more important for them to be in jail, especially when we look at the prison industrial complex. We have some cities in the state of Texas where the prison is the industry in the community, right? So they need customers, right? So in some instances, some of the institutions they want the clients to come back, right? So recidivism and making their way back into community. When we look at some of the issues at probation, it makes it hard for some people to hold a job, right? Because of the requirements that are put upon them. So some people are vested in it, especially when we look at that the reentry population is the new funding source for a lot of organizations, right? It's not that they're trying to make sure that these people don't go back to prisons. They're trying to fund the systems. So you have not only have the prison industrial complex not trying to not let them, not to close the revolving door, but you have some organizations that are utilizing this new population to fund their system. My father tells a story about Miss Johnson, and this young man who was a physician. He went back to his father, who was a physician, and he said, I cured Miss Johnson. And the father got upset. And he said, Miss Johnson was supposed, how do you think I paid for your house? How do you think I paid for your education? Miss Johnson was never supposed to get well. right? And we have the same thing for this particular population. You know, recidivism, you know, some folks are not meant to get well, right? They're meant to go back and be in the cycle. So there should be an obligation, you know, but they've taken a lot of the programs out of the education programs out of prisons. You know, they give them the gym, but they're not trying to educate them or make reentry a priority. As Robert said, reentry needs to start once they hit the door, right? And that doesn't happen in a lot of places. So that's my response. I don't know what Jeremy has to say.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. One story that was shared with me by my sister, she served 23 years, and she was incarcerated with the lady who had killed 3 people. And the lady had killed 3 people on 3 different occasions. And so I couldn't understand. I said, well, did she get charged all at the same time? And she said, no. She said she killed somebody. She got out on a technicality. She killed somebody and she went back and she got out on good behavior and another technicality. And now she just killed somebody else. And I said, well, you know, what's the deal with that? And she told me, she said, well, and this speaks to what Robert said and what Carl was saying too, like it starts when they hit the door. If they really cared or wanted to put those dollars toward it. This lady had been molested and raped by her father when she was a child. She was impregnated by her father and had a child that was raised as her sibling. The mother was in the home and knew all about this. And so the first guy that she killed was her husband because he did something that triggered her and took her back to instances with her father. Second situation, it was the same thing. Third situation, the same thing. And my sister got this info just by sitting on a bunk bed in a dormitory with this lady talking to her. And I thought, man, had somebody spoke to the trauma that this lady had dealt with and got her some counseling, she wouldn't be in prison and 2 other people wouldn't. You see what I'm saying? And so, and I just thought, like, if you as an inmate can pull this information just by sitting and speaking with someone, has anyone not, and I thought, okay, she's not the only case. And so I think it's very important that we get programs and systems inside the system to where we can speak to the plight of our brothers and sisters that just need a different outlook on life or need to have that trauma or whatever that they've gone through spoken to so they can get the proper help.
Thank you. Thank you for that story. Shirley, your hand has been up for a minute.
Come off of mute. So there are several people on this call from Texas Juvenile Justice Department. I'm with the Texas Juvenile Justice Department as the superintendent of schools. And so youth attend school daily, right? And so my question is, what are 3 things that we could do that could impact reentry? Because I understand that when kids come in, reentry does start when they get with us. But what are 3 things that we can do that can promote and enhance reentry?
I know Craig Moore is, I don't know if he's still on the phone, but there's an organization called Jails to Jobs that deal with the youth population. You also have Robert here as well, and I've seen him working with youth as well. We're working primarily with adults, but we're also getting ready to develop a diversion program with the African American Youth Harvest Foundation, where we'll be working with youth, and we're introducing a curriculum called the Alpha Mentoring Project, which can be converted to, is going to be used with both youth and adults. So if you like to talk offline, and again, the eco-cycle is large. You know, you have people like Robert. There are a lot of people in this eco-cycle that can speak to working with youth. We also have, I forgot their last names, but what I can do is if you share your information, I can connect you with a few organizations that work primarily with youth, dealing with the jail to prison pipeline. But the new word is the wound to prison pipeline. And so there's some people who are working in that area that I can connect you with.
Thank you.
Robert, your hand is up.
Yes, I was going to, I'm just going to reiterate the question. If I'm not mistaken, I heard what 2 or 3 or 4 things could be done to effect better outcomes for youth who are ensnared in the criminal legal system. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So number one, I would say, first of all, and I'm speaking from my own story, my own experience as a youth and as quote unquote an offender in the youth criminal legal system in California. I went through the California Youth Authority, starting at the age of 12. Number one, I would say it's important to see that youth as a human being and not their last worst mistake. That would be the first thing. To see them as a product of a context, meaning they don't necessarily create all of the influences that shape their behavior or their choices. And so I would encourage exploring the influences in that young person's life, who and what is shaping their outlook. And that requires someone to sit and to, as Brother Jeremy said, with the woman that was incarcerated and his sister, you have to create an experience where the youth is willing to open up and share things that wouldn't normally be shared with a quote unquote clinician or some kind of authority figure. So, because you got to draw information out. You can't necessarily, it's my belief, my conviction that you can't, you can't, first of all, children, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So listening to them, no matter how ludicrous the things they say are, no matter how much you disagree with them personally, I think it's important to create a safe place where the child can open up and be vulnerable and let you into their mind and into their heart. And then lastly, I would also say, for a youth, when we talk about reentry, it's a little different than talking about working with an adult. An adult, he or she is somewhat autonomous. They can make their decisions by themselves. But with a youth, that young person is still beholden to the authority figures in their lives. Either it's a parent, a surrogate parent, a foster parent. There's somebody that's going to be over that young person making the decision. And so my position on that, if my family system had been invested in the process of my reentering society, and my family system had been more adequately explored by those entities that intervened in my life or sought to intervene in my life, perhaps some of the outcomes would have been different. But never was my family circumstance ever addressed by any entity that I ever came in contact with the exception of the courts, who did a thorough investigation of my past, but did little. They explored and had me dig up, and my family dig up all kinds of, family matters that were unsavory. But none of those things were ever factored into how my program was designed for my return home and my success after my incarceration. So I say it's not an individual approach. It has to be a family dynamic. And if the child doesn't have a functioning family, then there needs to be some kind of alternative family system created for that child, and that child has to be inspired to see others beyond their biological loved ones as a family, so that there could be supports that child could be, or that young person could be willing to accept the guidance of others rather than making decisions on their own, which haven't proved well for them.
Thank you, Robert.
And I would say, just be genuine in your approach, not just with youth or teens, but adults. I'm a firm believer, there's a saying on the street or in the world that real recognizes real. And when you're genuine and you're real with someone, like, people are used to programs. They're used to calling a number or going somewhere and someone saying, I'll help you, and then they don't follow through, or they fall off. But when we're genuine in our approach, and we show, like, I get clients that come in all the time. I can dress professional and talk professional if that's what I choose, or I can show them like, hey, I've been where you are too. You know, I had a guy, like, me and him laugh all the time. You know, one of our questions on our intake form is like, would you like to share with me about your criminal background? And the guy was just like, man, I'm embarrassed. You know, I don't think, you know, I want to share that. He's like, you know, sitting with you, like, and I asked him, like, who am I? You know, who am I that you need to be embarrassed to tell me anything? And I told him, you know, I can tell you a little bit about me, you know. And as I started to share, he was like, man, I never would have thought that, you know. And when we're real and when we're genuine, you know, sometimes we get in a place and we sit behind titles and we sit behind positions and we forget where we come from. And one of the things that I do is I always work from a place of, I've been where you are, but I want you to be wherever you see me at, I want you to see yourself past that. And so I think just be genuine with them and work from the heart, and they'll see it. They'll see the true compassion and love that you have for your job and what you're doing. And then that'll open up the doors for them to be genuine with you as well.
Awesome. Now it is 2:31. We haven't even gotten to the questions that were sent to me privately. So how about we plan a volume 2 of this so that we can get to all those questions and, you know, talk more about re-entry. Now, where are you, Carl? I saw you. There you are. Closing remarks at this point. Closing remarks, but we definitely need to come back because I haven't gotten to the questions in the chat, like none of those.
Wow.
So let's close out with your closing remarks, and I promise perhaps in September or October, we can have a part 2 of re-entry. Okay, because next month we are talking about disabilities and mental health. I believe the specific one is hearing loss and mental health. And hopefully in September, we will talk about mental health and men. Yes, Carl? And then October, we can do a part 2 of re-entry. How about that? Agreed?
Of course.
Okay.
Whatever you need from us, Lady J.
Well, I've heard from all of you, and I'm so glad that you are all willing to share your experiences and especially the resources that is in the chat. So we definitely need to visit with each other more. Kyle, any closing remarks?
Sure. You know, a lot of folks who come in are looking for a place to stay and work. And 4 of our impact areas are housing, supportive services, and workforce development and training and education. And so we have some initiatives jumping off this year. We've partnered with M.Div. And so in August, we're kicking off a program called RESPI, the Reentry Self-Sustainability Pilot Initiative. And we're partnering with M.Div. We have a conversation with ACC today and Goodwill. And what we'll be doing is working with people who are coming out of prison, not coming out of jail, but have had extended periods of time, and we're going to get them workforce ready. And the neat thing about it is I'll be able to pay folks $500 a week to come to the training. And with the connections with ACC and Goodwill, we'll be able to get them job placement at the end of this. So that's what we're working on. We're also working with an organization called Blacks in Technology. My biggest dream is to get formerly incarcerated men and women and individuals into tech, right? And so it's called the Technology Allies Pilot Initiative. And we're working with them and the Austin Urban Technology Movement to get people trained. But what we're working on now is finding those in those companies who put up the glass door and the glass ceiling for allowing those people to get in. But we're working with, hopefully, the Texas Workforce Commission will be able to help us in making those things happen. But RESPI is the next thing that's coming off in August and October. We're doing our 3rd HIRE event. HIRE is the Hiring Initiative for Reentry Empowerment, which is a 2-day event. When I went to go and see Second Chance Hiring Fairs, we created HIRE because the Second Chance Hiring Fairs look more like speed dating, and we wanted to do something more substantive. And at our very first one, out of the 63 people who attended, 59 of them walked away the second day with a job or a second interview a laptop computer with 1 year of Wi-Fi and health insurance. So we made a difference. And that model we're continuing to do, and the next one is in October.
Thank you. Now, I know we are 5 minutes over time, but my good friend says I need to ask this question before you all leave. Is there a fee associated with all the services that you provide?
No, based on the grant funding that we receive, our services are free.
Okay, thank you. You all see me looking up. I'm looking at the chat, and everybody, this is my question before you leave, but that will be the last question. Jeremy, any closing remarks?
And who are you with, Carl?
Who asked that question?
Regina, I'm sorry, my computer was acting up. Who are you with?
Building Promise USA.
Okay, you're in Austin? Yes,
ma'am, we're in Austin. We're at 6633 Highway 290 East, or across the highway from the Reagan School.
Okay.
In a building where there are over 19 African-American nonprofits all in one building. And
that's awesome.
We mutually work with each other. I call it the Wakanda building. And that name is catching around the community, but we're housed with a lot of other organizations that we have rich partnerships with. Again, I told you, the Black Male Health Clinic is one of our partners. And we take people over there and we get we've had at least 20 referrals from them to bring people over to us. And so that's how we work in this building.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. It is 2:36. Sorry, we had to go over by 6 minutes, but it's been a wonderful conversation. Yes. I want to thank Carl and Jeremy for making this possible. To you audience members who have shared several resources in the chat, I really appreciate you all for being here and helping us do this. Please join us again next month. It's going to be the third Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. If you have a story to tell, a business idea to share, let us know. We have a platform for you. Until we meet again next month, please be well and be safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
We'll definitely have a part 2 for this. And all those whose questions I couldn't ask, please forgive me. We'll definitely have a part 2 for this. Thank you.
All righty. Good deal. Yeah. Good job. Good job.
Great. Thank you all.
All right. I told you they'll be good. Good deal. Take care.